Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another photo mishmash. This one being broadcast live April 3rd, 2019. And as usual, I'm very happy that I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Steve Skurich. Steve, how are you doing today?
I am great. How's everybody out there in the chat room? I know that you can't talk back, but a little thumbs up would be cool to see. Hopefully we've got a lot of new people on the line today.
I think so. You know, one of the things that I actually did was publish the link that this was going out yesterday. Oh, gave people a whole day's warning that we're doing our live show. It's nice when I can do that.
You got your act together, man.
Yeah. Some days I do have my act together, but because I did it from a slightly different time zone, YouTube was really confused for a while. And then even though it said the right time zone, it said it was starting an hour earlier than it was. So if anybody was hanging around for the last hour, sorry, but I shared that link out in a couple different places and told people 2 p.m. PDT, 5 p.m. EDT, 9 p.m. GMT.
Wow. You even got GMT in there.
I know.
Hey, we're growing, right? We got GMT time zone now that we have to worry about.
Sure.
That's great.
Sure. Yeah. And that actually just makes me think of G and T's and makes me want a nice gin and tonic.
Oh, geez. Why'd you have to bring that up? We're so overdue for another drinks and critiques. It doesn't even have to be drinks and critiques. What we're really overdue for is another live together show with cocktails on the table mixed into these cool cameras, especially the Fuji. By the way, I watched your review on that. And, well, I don't know if you want to send out any spoilers or anything, but I was a little surprised, I guess.
Well, you watched my review on the Fuji?
No, well, it was on the, sorry, you probably have a different set of cameras on the table there. Your $500 camera review.
That's right. Yes, let's talk a little bit about that. So the beginning part of the show, well, let's say what the show is all about. It's me and Steve chatting about stuff that we like. Usually cameras and photography, sometimes a little Star Wars, sometimes drinks and critiques. Who knows? But we do think
4 Star Wars references in one episode, including a prequel reference.
That's true. That happened last show. I don't know necessarily if that was a highlight of the show or not, but we're going to put it out there. And it's not something we necessarily need to achieve to beat anytime soon.
Yeah, that could have been a low point, actually. I'm not a prequel fan.
So you're referencing the $500 best $500 camera that Kaz and I worked on and put out last week. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, I thought it was great, and I was you had said that Kaz was helping you with this, so I was kind of anticipating him being on camera again, and he just does an awesome job. He does an awesome job with your videos and kind of helping you out with what you're doing on a daily basis. But I also love to hear what he has to say with regards to reviews. And I know he's more heavy on the video side of things, but he is one sharp dude. Like, he knows his way around a camera and some of the various intricacies of these cameras. And so I thought it was a great review, the two of you guys doing that together. I guess I was a little surprised by the choice at the end, but having watched the review leading up to it, I wasn't surprised. I guess I was just pulling for the Fuji.
Yeah, so you're referencing not the Fuji that's on the table, but the little Fuji XF10 fixed lens deal. Fantastic second or third camera if you're one of those people that likes to have a couple extra around. But with its fixed lens, it was a 24, 23 millimeter focal length lens. Just very limited in its capabilities and, kind of versatility. In its niche, great little camera. But beyond that, kind of hard. I was disappointed. Now, I do want people to go watch this. I am really proud of it. It is kind of one of the longer videos that I've put out in a while, but we trimmed as much junk out of it as we could, and it really is packed full of good discussions about what is a DSLR, what is a mirrorless, what are the advantages and disadvantages, how does a point and shoot compared to these others? What are its advantages and disadvantages? So you get kind of the full range of all of these cameras out at a fairly budget price point. And yes, as Caleb's pointing out, there certainly are some other cameras that should be considered. If you are thinking about any of the bridge cameras we talk about, read down in the comments. There are some other excellent choices. I also, in hindsight, think the SL2 from Canon would have been a much better pick in there instead of the T6. They both come in at about the same price. And that T6 from Canon is just a pile of disappointment. They just, here's the RP on the table, and they do it across the line until you pay $1 million for the cameras. They take this out and that out and this out to hit these price points. And they're like, well, we're Canon and we got all of these great lenses. That's not untrue, but it can be frustrating. And so that T6 was just, oh boy.
Yeah, that poor little dog of a camera. Yeah. Apologies to anybody out there who's shooting with that. And I know we're going to talk some more about crop sensors and full frame sensors and stuff like that, and those are important conversations to have. But I want to remind everybody too that I started my professional business as a photographer with a T3i, Rebel T3i. Shortly after that, I picked up a 60D. And then, after a couple of years of finding my way and figuring that I was ready for full frame and I was shooting in more low light scenarios where that was necessary. And having made a little bit of money as a professional photographer, I invested in a full frame system. So, things like the T6 compared to other things that are out there at that same budget, it falls short. But if you want to get started in the Canon world, I mean, the choice of lenses, and we don't have to get into all of that. I do think that SL2 would have been an awesome thing to see in the mix. I don't know that it would have climbed up the ladder a whole lot more, but that's a great entry-level camera if you want to get into the Canon universe.
Yep. Agree. Nicely said. And I like that you teased that we'll be talking a little bit about crop and full frame a little bit later in the show. I've got some pictures to share with folks. We'll discuss. I'm not going to make necessarily any kind of final judgments. And, Steve, it's interesting that you say that you got started with the T3i. I started with the T2i. When I first started shooting a couple of weddings as a second shooter, that was my main camera, the T2i.
Well, that's because you're old.
I think actually you're older.
Yeah, that's I am. For those in the audience, I am older than Toby, so I'll give you that.
Look. I don't know if you all know I'm a vain person or not. I'll let you know that I rewatched I watched my sub $500 camera video, or the video we're just talking about right now. And my biggest regret: why didn't I shave? Oh God, it's so patchy and there's gray all over my face. What is that? It's like I spilled white out on myself. I don't know.
Well, first of all, as far as being vain, you're a YouTuber, so you guys are all extremely vain. So, the playing field is just level, I guess, in that regard. But I've been touring with you now for well over 2 years, and we've become best buds, like brothers. You don't grow a great beard. I gotta say, you just don't grow a good beard. Sorry, pal.
Thanks for giving me the straight talk, Steve. And that's what this show is all about. Steve gives me the straight talk. We both give you the straight talk about cameras and gear and whatever else we're talking about.
I, on the other hand, grow enough beard and I've got enough arm hair and whatever for both of us. So we kind of balance each other out here, and the show's getting weird. But
yeah, I was just going to say, right, arm hair? Where'd you have to go to arm hair for? Yeah. Okay, let's come back to useful stuff. So, this show is public for all of you to watch, but there's a part where we review your images submitted. Those are our pen members. That's the Photo Enthusiast Network members. That is just a small piece of the kind of content, education, edutainment material that they get. A couple other things that have gone out in the last week that I want to highlight. Your Tuesday tip from last week, Let's Be Friends. Kind of a silly title, but Steve, I mentioned on the last show how I had this kind of friendly competition or rivalry that I hadn't shared, that I judge how well received those are by the number of replies we get and the number of kind of comments on the posts. And yours, I think, is the most yet ever. People loved that article. I finally had a chance to really sit down and read it. It's a little bit long, but it is awesome. Nice job.
Thank you. I do appreciate that very much. I know it came on the heels of what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, and I kind of just embraced And this isn't to say I'll do this every week by any means. I just mentally, I can't do it. But, you know, I think out of the four of us as partners in this business, we all bring something different to the table. And I think Allie does this too, where a lot of times a Tuesday tip will come out and it'll be something that just kind of speaks to your heart. And it's not to say that you and David don't do that, but you guys have a lot of incredible practical knowledge and you know, mindful knowledge on how to use your systems and what to do. My whole journey, for those who know it, has been very, very much looking inward and heart-based, and where do I want to go with my photography? What do I, you know, I see it as my legacy and all that other stuff. So I think that just tends to come through from time to time in my thoughts and my writing. And like I've talked about probably on the show before, I can be relatively introverted despite, you know, my putting myself out there and teaching and doing this kind of stuff. I, you know, kind of hide away and go into my beat lab and edit my photos and listen to my music and stuff. And so it's kind of my voice too. So I appreciate those comments very much. I'm glad that it spoke to some people. It's just, honestly, when I look at photography and the good breaks that I've had in my business, it's always been some type of friendship that has been kind of at the nucleus of that, as I mentioned in the article. So
yeah,
thanks for mentioning it.
Yeah, it really is good. And I say this every week, but there are many things that I love about the kind of what we do with Penn and the Photo Enthusiast Network. And one of them is that we approach those Tuesday tips from so many different angles. And one week you might get this lengthy, in-depth kind of discussion about what friendship means and how you can build it with photography, what that can mean long-term. And the next week you might get my tips for shooting the stars. Just kind of a straightforward guide. You know, I've put out videos in the past on that, but now we just taught the stars the other night on the workshop, and it went the most smooth it's ever gone because of a couple of ways that I changed what we did before we got out there. So I incorporated that into my tips and wrote that all up. So if you want to see this stuff, what's that?
Tell everybody it's because I wasn't there complaining about intervalometers and star trails. I won't be offended at all. I know what my boundaries are now.
I know. Well, I mentioned your name a few times when we talked about star trails. I was like, they're not Steve's favorite because everybody's got all, and the shooting the stars part was some of the fastest. Everybody got it the faster than I've ever seen anybody get it on a workshop, just because of a little pre-teaching and practice in the room, in the light. That really made a difference. And then we got out there and they got those and had enough time that we all shot a series for star trails. But it is rough getting everybody's intervalometer set up and helping them through that, because everybody has a different intervalometer. And then you got a couple of people with Nikon. So when you even give out the general directions of how many shots in your interval, Nikon's intervalometer, why are you like the way you are? You drive me crazy. And so it's very different. So, but overall it went really well. So these tips are you never know what you're going to get, but you're always going to get something that's helpful to you as a person and a photographer. And I really like that. So I'm really proud of what we're doing. If you want to find out more, photorec.tv/Penn, PEN for Photo Enthusiast Network. We've got videos that go out every week too that are added to that site that are just for Penn members. David McKay, how to see the different types of light, really portrait photography we're talking about here. This is a super short, quick and easy video that shows you with a fantastic model, our cowboy and bus driver Sweeney, in an old Pioneer bar in Montana a couple weeks ago. So you can check that out. If you haven't already and you're a Penn member, make sure you take the time to do that. And then Steve, another great video tutorial from you. I think there's a lot of friction that people find before ordering a print. I mean, one, is this good enough? Two, have I post-processed it good enough? Three, what size do I want? What kind do I want? The kind of the choices you have to make. There's a lot of choices. And I find the more choices I have to make, the less likely I am to do something. You know, That's why I don't put big meals together. Bean burrito, heat up some beans, and then get the extras. Peanut butter and jelly, bread, peanut butter, jelly. Not a bunch of choices. I like that. And so you put out a video. We love working with Bay Photo. They are a fantastic photo lab in California. You put out the video that walks you through the ordering process and kind of takes away all the mystery and just gives you what you need to know.
Yeah, it's just one slice of what you can actually do with their Rose system. And Rose, what is that? Something online ordering online. I can't remember what the acronym stands for.
I don't remember either. Nope.
Like Dr. Evil. Anyway, yeah, when it comes to printing photos, I think people almost fall in one of two camps. Either you have no interest in being tech savvy at all, so you take your little memory card down to a local printer and you say, here, find these files for me and run these prints off. I want, duplicates of 4x6s. I want some wallet size to give to my friends or whatever, and then occasionally you print off an 8x10 or something for your house. So there's that person that does tons of printing and they don't want to know anything about the technology. And then as soon as you start to learn about all this stuff and how to use your camera and how to edit your photos, shooting raw, all that stuff, all of a sudden you find yourself in this camp of like not printing anything. And so we're constantly telling people, like, get them out of the computer, print your images, display your work. That, in my opinion, is what's really great about photography, is when it becomes this tangible print. I love that so much. However, it just becomes intimidating. So hopefully it helps you out a little bit. I got some feedback from Bay Photo. Our marketing person over there is Mallory. She is a total sweetheart. And she loved it. She wants to actually distribute it out to her team. And so, yeah, it's not very long, but you at least get to see how I prepare a photo for print. And I don't mean the word prepare like edit the photo. I just mean how I upload it into their system. And you have to use their system because you're dealing with very large file sizes, but it shouldn't be intimidating at all. Just take a look at it and you'll see what I mean.
Yep. Yeah. Great. Take the time and print something. Watch that video. Be inspired to print something. Even when you get to the bigger sizes, there is certainly a cost associated there. But when you're talking about 8x10s, 16x20s, they're very affordable. They really are. You spent big money probably on a camera and lens. Spend 30, 40 bucks to put a nice picture on your wall that's yours.
Well, and you guys will be surprised if you're using Bay, if you're doing a larger print, and even if you're not using their fine art papers, the cost is not that big. You can have it dry mounted later, but they do a great job. And I like to just have things dry mounted. And then they ship it to you for like $1.50. It ships all the way across the country to me for $1.50 for most of my prints. Over a certain size, you have some other fees, or if you go metal above a certain size, they have to crate it and stuff. So that gets into big money. But if you're just doing paper prints, large format, it's not that expensive. And they always do a great job. And if you get it and it's not a great job, you call them up, you talk to them, and they redo it for you. I just sold 3 prints to a client, and we went through 4 processes to get it right. And it's not that they screwed it up. It ended up costing me a little bit on one image in particular, but they were determined to get it right, and they took good care of me.
Nice. Yep. It's definitely worthwhile to work with a quality lab, because the end result is going to be best. And yeah, good. All right. We're wrapping up the parts of stuff that you might have missed. I'll just one more shout out. We just wrapped up our Southwest tour. This was our 4th workshop in that kind of general area. They're always changing a little bit. We usually hit the same big highlights, but you never know where we're going to end up for this or that. Well, we know, but it changes from time to time. We had a couple of typically we get 2 hours in our own private slot canyon. So just us. So those of you watching who know anything about Antelope Canyon, you know that you are herded through, and there are a couple key places where you're allowed to make a photo and you're allowed to set up for maybe a minute or two before they move you on, and you're wall to wall with photographers all trying to get that shot at the same time. It worked out that we actually had on this trip 3 hours. 3 hours for 17 photographers in the entire slot canyon to wander back and forth as we wish. It was just, I mean, it was a dream. I mean, slot canyons were on my bucket list forever. And then when we first walked into that slot canyon last year, I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is as good as I expect, if not better. And every time I go back, I see different things, different perspectives, different shots. I love it. And to have that much time in there was just really, really awesome. We've got 2 tours next year. One sold out within an hour. It's sold out within 1 hour. Second tour is just about to be announced. If you're interested, email hello@mckaylive.com and say, Toby told me to email you. It'll be in mid-March of next year, and you can set up payment plans. We hit the Grand Canyon, the Slot Canyons, Zion, and a bunch of little awesome places in between. I love the trip. I love it so much.
Yeah, there's iconic spots that we go to, like the Grand Canyon and Horseshoe Bend, and then of course all around Zion. But it's those little stops. You know, we've done like Valley of Fire State Park, Slot Canyons. Obviously, it's a very special thing, and certainly probably the highlight of the trip for me. But it's those little stops, or shooting stars at night when the weather calls for it. Those types of things tend to be just almost a better time. Well, I mean, it all just kind of comes together, and it's a lot of shooting. You cover a ton of ground, but these are some just iconic spots. The weather is usually really nice, and it's a great tour. I'm glad that it's still. I mean, we launched one last year, and it sold into 3 immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of doing that again. So I think this is a place that we want to just keep going back to, because it is iconic.
But just for people's information, there isn't room for 3 next year. There will only be 2. And so if you are interested, what's that?
Did you run that by Dave?
Yeah. We really, this one is kind of squeezed in, but it not that the tour is any different, just means we have some other tours on either end that are kind of close. Speaking of tours, Frank May in a chat room reminds us that New Zealand is not far away.
Yeah. You were doing, where did I see a countdown? Was it on like one of your Insta stories or something?
That's right.
Like that?
Insta story posts. I think we're down to 21 days from now. We'll be flying towards New Zealand.
Yeah, my first time there. This is the second time for you, right?
It will be my second time. Yep.
Yeah, I've never been wanting to go for years. In fact, getting over to New Zealand and Australia are 2 places I wanted to go to since I was a little kid. So I'm super excited about this. Can't wait. And I know we've got a couple people on the trip that have been before, and they're just like, basically, anytime you guys go to New Zealand, I'm in. I just want to keep going back over and over and over again. So I know it's going to be an incredible journey.
It's a very special place. And, kind of as we discuss gear and things like that, as I always do leading up to kind of the bigger trips, I really think about how I can lighten my load, and maybe we'll get some chance to talk about that a little later this show or next week, because I think we'll be back next week. Let's switch gears a little bit and dive into one of our favorite parts of the show, one of the parts of the show that I think is the most useful, not that our witty banter isn't. But we've got images submitted from our Photo Enthusiast Network members into Lightroom, and we use this as kind of Lightroom training. We also jump over to Photoshop sometimes because it's so easy. And we do a little critiquing too. But remember, if you are a pen member, you have a lot of different ways to get review and feedback on your images. You can post them in our awesome community. And really quick, I'll say this about our community. I was thinking about, how to impart on people, how to share with people how special I really do think this community is. And I realized that the other day, the way everybody interacts with each other in that community is as if they were in the same room. And that is so refreshing online. So often you see somebody say something to somebody else in kind of a negative or derogatory or, just kind of, you're an idiot way. that's so common online because we're never face to face. We don't have to deal with the backlash of that. But this community, for whatever reason, I like to think part of it is my kind of group founded, and built it. But it's a lot of people that have been on McKay trips together, a lot of people that haven't, and it all just works so nicely. And everybody is helpful, gives good, helpful feedback and criticism in a way that I can't think of any other word other than helpful.
Well, I always like to say it's non-intimidating, because I think people get really nervous about sharing their images, and I very much was that person for a long time. So when we talked about putting this company together, one of the things at the core of it is one place where people can go and they don't have to feel intimidated, and they can feel comfortable sharing, and then people can feel comfortable saying what they need to say for feedback, but to do so in a friendly way. And we made that very, very clear right from the beginning. And it's not like we even have to do anything to manage that. Everybody's just super friendly. And I've said this before, people pay to be there. So you're just avoiding all the political garbage and people's motives and stuff like that. Like, people are just there to become better photographers and collaborate with each other. And I'm very proud to see what everybody's doing, over and beyond what we're able to do, because all along it was, okay, let's get this thing off the ground and then be able to step back a little bit and let the community just kind of come alive, and it's doing it.
Yep. Well said, Steve. All right, here we go into Lightroom to talk a little bit about some of these pictures that have been submitted to us. First up, our good friend Timmy. Here in Seattle, we have a wheel with a bunch of LED lights on it that can be a lot of fun to shoot a longer exposure with. I say can be because there's times I've gone down and it doesn't do anything other than a single white circle, which isn't always the most exciting. But Tim got it around Pride Week, I guess. So we have some really fun rainbow colors, a long exposure, 30 seconds. And that's pretty cool.
That is cool. I do think that maybe the exposure is a little too long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, I don't know what it would look like with a shorter exposure. It's just, it could be my monitor though too. It just looks kind of soft. I don't know if there was any type of camera shake that was experienced, or sometimes with water, if you go a little too long, it becomes almost just smoky. You know what I mean? Like it's.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And there's just that the little wavelets kind of all add up and pile on top of each other, and you end up with a little bit more of that haziness there.
Yeah, and I've done plenty of this. In fact, just today I shared an old picture from 2013 that I took of the Chicago skyline, and I was looking at the water. I was like, dang it, I went too long on that. It's just, and I didn't have anything shorter to work with. But that aside, I think this is totally cool that Tim did this.
Yeah.
I would be kind of curious to see some different white balances though.
Okay, so real quick, I brightened it a little bit. We're working with Tim's finished JPEG here, but I brightened it just a little bit more to help kind of bring out some of the detail in the background and stuff. I think it kind of tells part of the story of this place, waterfront, not too far from industrial. And then I was just adding a little clarity to the water to kind of sharpen that a little bit, and maybe beat back the haze that Steve was mentioning. And then white balances. So let's say, we got a JPEG, so we're limited here. Let's just warm it up a little and see what you think. What do you think of that?
So I like it on the sky and the cranes. You got a little too much orange coming out there, but I don't like what it did to the Ferris wheel. So I would kind of selectively change some color a little bit. Maybe a graduated filter and then erase out the Ferris wheel. But also increasing the dehaze tool, whether you do it in certain areas and paint it on, or do a global edit of dehazing, might just sharpen things up just a little bit.
Okay. Sorry, say that again. I was thinking about go ahead.
Yeah, no, I like what you're doing there, but I was just saying, increasing the dehaze slider, whether you do it globally or on, painted on certain areas, I think is going to sharpen things up just a little bit too.
Yeah. And then one of the things that I like to do is we've got this gradient, radial gradient that is affecting outside. We hit the O key, we can see that it's outside the circle. In this case, we could really drop the feathering so that it's a little bit of a harder edge. And then in our chat room, the Panda photographer had a suggestion of increasing saturation on the wheel itself. So what happens if we duplicate this and then invert it? So now we're working inside and we just kind of up the saturation just a little bit. I wouldn't do it much. And
maybe up a little bit of, I don't know if you want to up any clarity there. Maybe some dehazing or contrast.
It's pretty wild looking. I think those are some nice improvements. Let's hit our backslash. Here is our before. Here's our after.
Yeah, Tim, Tim did a nice job, and your comment was wild looking, and that's okay. I think when a picture is kind of wild looking, you can push things a little bit further than maybe you would with something you want to keep extremely realistic, because it's obvious when somebody looks at this that it's a long exposure photograph, and you have to take a second look to figure out exactly what's going on. So that being kind of your default as you're looking at the image gives you some room to kind of play around.
Yeah. And the Panda photographer really wants me to make sure that he said, or she, actually, I'm not sure, would have manually kind of tweaked these. And we do love the HSL and color panel for really being able to tweak individual colors without having to select them. You can just pick them off the bar or get the little donut. And I was showing that on the workshop this weekend. So both are good suggestions. Nice shot, though, Tim. We're going to move on. Adam Beck squeezed this in just a little bit earlier this afternoon and said the watercolor was stunning here, and that's exactly what it looked like. They did very little editing as far as the watercolor goes.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And it sounds like I'm beating the dehaze drum right now, but if you could just apply a little bit, and we've talked about this tool before, but for those who haven't listened to us do this before, this whole section, this present section, clarity, dehaze, vibrant, saturation, you got to think of it as salt on food, right? Just a little bit can really bring out the dish, but too much spoils it. So you got to be careful. But increasing that and maybe contrast just slightly kind of just makes things pop a little bit. And this picture, I mean, this is just beautiful. So what I would do from here, I actually like the way that it's processed, in my opinion. I would take it into Photoshop and I would clean up a few things, really kind of simplify the entire scene. And I'll show you one trick in particular was the first thing that I thought about. And I think we've done this on the show before, but go and grab the Band-Aid. That's like the healing, spot healing.
Healing brush. You want the spot healing or the healing brush tool?
The spot healing.
Yep.
And see those vertical lines that are going right down the waterfall? That some people may like those. For me, they bug me, because if I was painting the scene, I would not put those in there. So and I'll save you a little bit of time. Actually, just click once at the bottom of it, and then go up to the top of it, hold the shift key down and click again, draws a perfectly straight line, and it's gone. And nice. Same thing with the one on the right side of the fall as it starts going down, top, shift key, boom, gone. And then I would clean up, on that left edge, I would take, some of those rocks out.
Yeah, we ended up with one thing to be careful when you're using any tool that gets rid of stuff in Photoshop is, especially if Photoshop is deciding what to put there instead, is to be very careful about repetition. So right here and here, we have a little duplication. You're going to want to fix that. And then I ended up taking this branch out completely because it put in a duplication piece as well. So those are just kind of real quick ideas to give you. I do think that really cleans that up nicely. And then Steve, were you saying this rock here?
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest with you, I would play around and try some different things. I would probably take out that little island that is over on the bottom left And the reason for that is that's a very powerful spot visually, and it's totally cool. I especially love the way that the water is kind of coming over the shallow rocks and you can see them under the water and then the rocks over. The problem that I have with it is it's a subplot that ends abruptly. So you kind of start there and all of a sudden your eye jets over to the left and wants to see where that piece of land continues on. So it's not necessarily bad leaving it in there. I'd play around and take it out, see what I thought. So it's all just that turquoise color. But if I didn't like it, I'd just back it off and keep that in there. But I would definitely, the rocks that are just kind of right on the edge of the frame, I would take those out because they're just, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Now I see this is, let's go back to Lightroom. Let's say we're happy with this. We just close it. We say save and we're back into Lightroom with our new PSD copy that has the differences, and you can kind of go back and forth and quickly see. And one of the things that I'm interested in is, he did say, Adam said he used the ND filter. We've got 10 seconds, F10, ISO 400. It's a little noisier than I would expect at ISO 100. So be careful about that. You've lost a little bit of detail because of that noise. And you probably could have gone maybe 5 seconds and ISO 200, get a little bit cleaner. But otherwise, it is a beautiful, beautiful shot. The Panda photographer's got a lot of good suggestions today. What about a little bit more vignette? We might add in to get a little bit more dreamy. Vince wants us to Photoshop in himself in a rubber ducky. This is a cool spot. I like it.
Is that oh, Vince?
Yep.
Hey, yeah, we can make that happen, man. I've got some great photographs of Vince. We can put you in there.
See the kind of things we do for our pen members. All right, Adam, cool shot. We're going to move on to Tara, who was just on our Southwest Photography Workshop. And we're driving along the rim of the Grand Canyon, really feeling like we were going to get skunked out in sunset. And then all of a sudden, the clouds parted and this amazing light started to shine through. So she submitted to us one of her shots from that location.
Now, has this been edited?
No, I don't believe so. She submitted a D&G, but it doesn't have any edits. Tara, I know you and I were talking on the trip about how to do that. I'm not sure if it still didn't work for you or if you just submitted it without edits.
Okay. Yeah, because it kind of looked like a raw image. So the first thing that I do, and this is, the curse of being an architectural photographer, is that horizon line that goes from the far left over to the formation that is closer to us is, yes, it needs to be straightened out.
Yeah. Does that look a little closer? A little too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can always use the level tool. You can go to crop and then grab the level and just draw a line where you think it should be. And that usually does a pretty nice job.
Yep.
So that's the first thing that I would do. And you can see that there are just some amazing color that can be brought out in the sky up there. And what I typically like to do with my skies is I like to make them colorful and beautiful and everything else, but I like to keep them soft, especially when the sky meets a rocky sort of landscape, and then I want to bump up some contrast and bring out some detail in the rocks and stuff. So you get that contrast between the smooth, colorful, beautiful sky and then this rocky, harsh sort of mountainous area, I think can look very dramatic.
I agree. I think Tara's got some. I think this is and Tara just commented in chat. No edits to this. This is a gorgeous image straight out of camera. I mean, I feel like really nice tones, no deep shadows, no super bright areas except for maybe right here. So it gives us a lot of room to work with. And I think I'm in this picture. I might be one of these yahoos standing up here in your shot, Tara. We'll fix that in a minute.
There you are, Mr. YouTube Vane again.
I just saw someone taking a picture and I just jumped in front. That's what I do. But I was trying to get a more of an up canyon or a western canyon view. And Tara, you got this one that's looking a little bit more north. And man, it's lovely. So Steve, I made some quick edits here. I upped the saturation in the sky. I brought the highlights down a little, added a little contrast. Oh, exposure was up already. Let me bring that down a little bit. There we go.
Yeah.
What do we think?
I want everybody to pay attention to the histogram in the top right there. Look at all, don't pay attention. It doesn't matter so much, all the peaks and stuff, but look at how everything is exposed right within pure black to pure white. So it was shot at the right time of day. Tara nailed the exposure.
Yep.
All that data is just, you've got so much to work with there. And that's why we shoot raw, right? So that you capture all that data. None of it has been compressed. And you have tons of editing capability to kind of bring out the scene that your mind's eye saw when you were there. So it's a gorgeous scene. She shot it really well. Great job, Tara.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So Steve, now, would you bring dehaze down or clarity down?
I never bring dehaze down because that is going to add haze, and it's kind of like putting a white vignette onto a photograph. I just pretty much never do it. You're just talking about the sky.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the sky.
Yeah, I bring clarity down. Dehaze I generally leave alone. I might boost my highlights if I need to soften some things, because you can see where you've got some pink and orange right in the middle that is just getting a little blotchy. So that's where you got to be kind of careful and look at the highlights and then the whites and the blacks. And I would probably bring even contrast down a little bit.
Yeah. Saturation back up. Yep. And then I did real quick, if people were, while Steve was talking, I brushed and just erased the gradient from the kind of foreground rock right there as well. I think that looks pretty nice.
Honestly, I know that we've been doing a lot of work with that graduated filter, but Tara, for your own benefit, as you go and edit this photograph, you may not even need to use a graduated filter. I think some of the global edits are just going to make those colors pop out a little bit more, and you'd be surprised at just how much that stuff comes out when you start to move the sliders around a bit.
Yeah. But then you might even brush on a little bit of dehaze down here, just a little bit. We talked a lot about this. I know you heard me, Tara, in the workshop. You really don't want to remove all of the haze because it gives a sense of depth and distance. We commonly see this out in the world, things very far away are a little bit hazy. So you want to leave some of it, but just really nice. And I think the Q tool, the spot removal tool, I think it's good enough in this case to just kind of do quick little people removal up there. And as some of you spotted, and Tara, you were asking, we have that tripod sticking into the corner. With straightening, we've kind of gotten rid of it, and then just a little bit of cropping, and then just a little bit of removal tool. We can kind of get that out of there.
Just for a second, can you pull this into Photoshop real quick?
Yes. Give me one more person to get rid of that. Okay. So again, I didn't talk through that before, but I'm just going to right click on this, edit in Photoshop, and we're going to pop into Photoshop.
Now, on the last photograph, we were talking about the spot healing tool, which is a little Band-Aid that you pick up. Just for this example, I'd want to use the lasso tool, which I tend to use for larger fixes. Now, on that lower right corner, if you can just lasso that whole kind of blank area, not the bushes. We want to pull all that, but right on the corner there, and then fill content aware. And now what Toby's showing you right now is actually a new addition to Photoshop, and we did a tutorial on this recently where you can actually define where it's going to pull from. So this is content aware fill as its own. So when you select fill, there's ways to go with how to fill that space in. But now the subsection of content aware fill has its own tool basically here, where you get to select what it's pulling from, highlighted on Toby's computer in green.
Yeah. And I have to say, usually I don't spend a whole lot of time kind of defining that. It seems to do a decent job. And even if it includes a little bit of stuff else, it still seems to do a decent job. So, but I helped it out a little bit. Let's hit OK. We also had that preview. And then it's just, we just got some nice bushes down in there now that look like they belong.
Yeah, so you had this little dry patch that was left when we took the tripod leg out. So just a simple content-aware fill with something that's as random as that usually does a pretty nice job. And then you just have to look at it to make sure that there's not duplicates right next to each other, something that makes it look like, you know, you've just clone stamped everything.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. That looks nice and very, very nice. I might paint a little bit more warmth onto these rocks, but really this just out of camera is a great shot. Very nice, Tara. I like it. Let's move on so the show isn't 5 hours long. All right, Tara, we're going to come back to that next week. But look, folks, this is the kind of stuff that we get to see in the slot canyons. It is just awesome. And then this is iconic Horseshoe Bend, but we did something different on this tour. We had access to the Navajo side. So basically split right down the middle, National Park side, on the left, the Navajo side. And we had a Navajo dancers, hoop dancer, and then also just dancing. And I had permission to fly my drone, which is just, I feel so lucky that I was able to fly my drone at Horseshoe Bend.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. And you know, honestly, I've produced so many images of Horseshoe Bend. I've seen so many images of Horseshoe Bend. I really enjoy seeing it from this angle because I've never been over where you guys were. Yep. And yeah, you don't show the water going all the way around, but this actually shows a lot more of the depth that you can kind of see in the canyon walls and stuff. It doesn't flatten it out so much. It's kind of a tricky shot.
Mm-hmm.
Who's was this Kevin's?
This is Kevin's. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the focal length? I'm guessing
11.
Okay. So I just want to bring something to everyone's attention. When you're shooting super wide like this, it's really important if you are on a tripod. And maybe he did this, I'm guessing not. It looks to me like the camera was angled downward. And the reason I say that is the middle of the bend there, or the rock that's right in the middle is really kind of sloped, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can see some of the distortion that occurs with the angles and stuff if you're angled down. It's important to try and shoot level as much as possible. If that means you have to move your tripod up or down, you just have to do it because it becomes kind of tough to change those angles. So you can try, like we can go into the guided transform tool. If you go into transform, first of all, hit auto. I want to see what Lightroom does. Okay, it just straightened it. It didn't do anything.
And I don't even, I think, agree with its straightening. I think it needs to come back down a little bit.
I think it was.
It was okay.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the horizon at the top.
Yeah.
You want that to be straight.
Yeah. Okay. So now what would you do?
Well, so you can try those guided lines on the right side, and then, you know, kind of, you can just draw two of them vertically on either side of the canyon walls, but not totally vertical. You're going to want to adjust the angles. You know what I mean? Like, so you can increase them slightly and just kind of play around with it still. Okay, so obviously that just is too extreme. Now just grab the bottom of it and swing it one direction or the other and see what it does to the image until it looks legit or it looks realistic.
I thought I was going the right way. Do I need to go that way more?
It's usually the opposite of what you think.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah. You know, this is Steve, I'm really glad I noticed this too, but I didn't really have a good sense of how to fix it. But you pointing out how much this was sloped in that previous in the shot before we started this guided, and now look at it, it is much more of a vertical surface, which is what you get. And even though we've lost a ton on the left or the right, this does look more true to life.
Yeah, now there's still distortion, obviously, but when you have distortion when you're shooting super wide and you have distortion right under your feet, it's going to look very flat and horizontal. and you're shooting something that's vertical. So it kind of accentuates what's there, and it can look really odd.
Yeah.
So, you know, I typically play around with these angles until it looks a bit more realistic. And yeah, it can look a little bit more distorted as you get closer to camera, but maybe you can crop that out. Or, you know, the focal point is obviously the water going around that rock formation. So I just encourage people to play around with this stuff. Like I've said a million times, you're not going to break the photograph. It's a raw photo. You can hit reset, go right back to where you were. But that guided transform is extremely powerful. And we've done a number of tutorials on it. If you're a Pen member, there's some stuff in there. And I use that all the time in my real estate and architecture photography.
Yep. Yep. Good points. And Kevin, I just point out, it looks like f2.8 for a scene like this, I really would go to a higher aperture so you can really get sharpness all the way back. Obviously, with a very wide angle lens, f2.8 does give you a pretty big depth of field, but we still have a good sharpness front to back. And with 1/400th of a second, I knew you have room to drop that shutter speed. This was handheld, but then of course you can always throw it on a tripod and drop that shutter speed to whatever you want to get.
Yeah, and because it was handheld, I'm guessing, you know, maybe Kevin was standing up, and unless he was, you know, certain places at Horseshoe Bend, you kind of have to lay on the rock, and but you just got to be really, really careful about how much, because the slightest tilt up or down with an 11mm lens is just going to distort. And you can use that to work for you to create drama and stuff like that. But for this particular scene, you know, if you're standing, just come down to your knees, you know, be a human tripod, and try to keep the camera as level as possible.
Yeah, good suggestions. It's so easy to forget when you're working with a wide angle lens, you know, to watch out for that distortion, but that's absolutely true. John's wondering in the chat, you know, is the only way to really capture this without distortion to shoot a kind of panoramic composite?
You know, that's actually a great point, John. I just sold an image to a client, just sent it off yesterday in the mail, and it is a panorama. It's a 2-shot horizontal. So usually when we're shooting a horizontal panorama, we say turn your camera vertical. I was using a medium format, so I get, you know, kind of a wider range to work with. So I just took 2 shots and I stitched it together super wide, and it gave me tons of cropping ability, and I could play with the angles a lot more. So yes, your point is pretty much spot on. If you find that you're not quite getting everything in the scene that you want to, but even more so than if you're taking 1 shot, if you're using a super wide lens and you're going to stitch it together as a panorama, make sure that thing's as level as possible. Probably turn it vertical, take like 3 shots, and then stitch that together and crop in. So great point, John.
Very nice. All right, good stuff, Steve. We're going to move on to the news. First, we start off with gear. Kind of run through a couple of gear headlines, chat about them a little bit. We will get to a little bit more of a discussion about full frame versus crop. I've got some images I'm going to put on the screen. I'm going to quiz you all. I'm going to quiz you, Steve, to see what you think. Just a little fun. And then...
well, then we'll get on. I'm going to start quizzing Pam because she just commented, how do you fill in the corners on that last image? And, oh, Pam, I'm going to sound like a broken record to you. I've said it on Facebook a million times. We've got a tutorial on that. I'm starting to take this personally, that nobody watches my stuff.
That actually, I think all of us have our own tutorials on like the content aware fill and the spot healing. It is the most well-covered topics within the Pen site and membership of, you know, hundreds of hours of video tutorials in there. And we have probably like 10 hours. It's not that many, but it's a lot of content aware fill. Speaking of content aware fill, that is such a great segue into, all right, maybe we just impressed you with the Photoshop content aware of how well it does, or maybe you've been using Photoshop for a while. So you're like, hey, that's cool. I've seen it do that. How about video? Content aware and video is coming. Check this out. I got to share my screen again here for a second.
I saw that on Petapixel about the cars.
No, this is not the cars. So this is a new feature coming, and I'm probably gonna. Oh, sorry, it's talking to me.
I'm totally kidding around. I love joking around with you, but And had we not gone so long on what we were doing, I'd actually show you exactly how to fill in those spaces. It is fairly easy. It's something you have to do in Photoshop though. But we'll check that out if you can. It's not that difficult, not as difficult as you think it would be, but I was just kidding around with you. Love you, Pam.
I love you, Pancakes. That is her nickname. I didn't just make that up. Okay, so this is After Effects. This is an update for After Effects, which is part of the Adobe suite that includes, you know, lots of different things. And here we have, I think this is probably drone footage. We're also probably going to get a copyright ding for displaying all of this. But you've got these sections that, you know, aren't great. They're distracting. And especially if you were shooting a movie of medieval times, you don't want a tourist with a cell phone walking through your thing. So this video is a demonstration of content-aware fill happening in real time to a video. So she's hitting, you can't hear this audio, she's hitting the generate fill layer, it's going, and then let's move forward. Where is it? Somewhere right there. There, the spots are gone where those people were.
Wow.
And now it's going to just continue to play the video, and that content aware fill, holy smokes, people. Holy smokes.
And you know, that's way more forgiving than a photograph that you're going to print as a, you know, 60-inch or something and put on the wall and analyze with your eyes, because it's motion. So
yeah,
that is awesome.
That's pretty cool. So that came out today, and that's a great segue to mention that Lightroom got updated today. It's not very exciting though, unless you own a Canon EOS RP or one of the little Lumix point and shoots or other kind of bridge cameras. Those cameras' raw files are now supported. That's really the only thing that has changed in Lightroom. But I was very happy because I just shot a couple of hundred, maybe even 1,000 pictures with the RP on the Southwest trip as I'm working on my review of it. And it's always a bummer when I'm only looking at the JPEGs. But I will say Canon makes nice JPEGs straight out of the camera. They look good. They really do. And so, yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that camera. So if you have Lightroom Creative Cloud subscription, you can click. Listen to this, Steve. So I'm teaching Lightroom on our workshop and talking about, hey, the best deal we think is at $9.99 a month. And you get Lightroom Classic, and you get Photoshop. And I show them the little link, Adobe, it says $19.99. And I'm like, no, it's $9.99, isn't it? And I kept trying, kept searching, kept going. Everybody in class is looking at me like I'm crazy. A couple of people are going, oh, I should have bought yesterday when it was $9.99. And I'm like, no. And then I searched news, like go to Petapixel. Did something happen overnight? Did I miss something? Nope, nothing. So finally I was like, I don't know. I'm going to give up for now, go back to teaching. A day later, Sherman, one of the participants, walks up and he said, shows me on his phone. He said, no, it's still $9.99. I was like, Sherman, where did you get that link? I could not make that work. And he says, here, I'll send it to you. I said, great, thank you. Later that night, back in my room, I click his link that he showed me $9.99, lands me on a page, and it says $19.99. I'm like, what is going on? And so then I'm over there complaining, and Kaz is my roommate, and Kaz says, try an incognito window. But
yeah, I was going to say, because it's seeing that you're already a subscriber.
But I wasn't even signed in. So, but that's right. It knows through the cookies, those stupid little cookies, that I'm a subscriber. And I don't understand that marketing there. Subscribers only see a higher price in the future, but people that have never subscribed to get the $9.99, what is that? That feels really crummy, Adobe.
Yeah, there's got to be some sort of explanation for that. I've never heard that before, but I can't say that I'm surprised either.
So, I mean, the moral of the story, it is still $9.99. I do think that's a good deal. I still think Lightroom is the best at kind of doing everything. It's kind of like a, you know, Steve, I know you and I have very different opinions about cars. I feel like Lightroom is a minivan. You know, it might not be the sexiest around, it might not be the fastest around, but it can hold a lot of stuff. It does it well. It's got underseat organization. I mean, you know, it's good. It's good enough.
Yeah.
It's not a Jeep. It's not a Tesla. Speaking of that, our friend G, who we've been on a couple of trips with now, he has switched completely over to Capture One, and talking to him enough made me re-up my subscription to Capture One too. So I really do hope to bring you all some side-by-side comparisons down the road. But what I love about going on these trips is talking to people that have the time to do things that I don't, like really compare Lightroom and Capture One and be like, Capture One's raw engine for some cameras does do a superior job. So
yeah, it's well, I've done a little bit. I've talked about this before, but I could find the time to do that. The problem is I've played with Capture One and I absolutely love Capture One. I love the way it processes the raw files, the color. It's beautiful. So I'm already sold on it. My problem is I can't use it with my Hasselblad files.
Aw, poor Steve with his Hasselblad.
I want everybody to shed a tear for me right now about my Hasselblad files. And yeah, so it's not that I can't use them. It's that if I want to use them and retain all the metadata, I have to literally just strip it all out and then import. It's just kind of a logistical nightmare for me as somebody.
Not quite worth it.
So anyway, yeah, I'm very jealous of those who get to use Capture One.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah, I really want to explore it seriously again some more this year. You know, people are pointing out in the chat that the airlines do the same thing, hotels do the same thing. Kevin Walk says I should call Adobe and ask. That is a great suggestion. I should be like, why do I see $19.99 when I'm telling all my friends and family it's $9.99? That's a
well, here's the thing. Here, you know, we just didn't realize when we were kids that Big Brother is actually Cookie Monster.
Wait, what?
It's those damn cookies, man.
I was gonna say the only kind of good cookies are Oreos, but actually, there's very few cookies I don't like. So except for the ones that make Adobe software double the price.
Yeah, I'm an Oreo nut, man. I love those things. Haven't had them in a long time. You know what I did have recently that I'm almost embarrassed to admit this.
Oh, this is good. Let's hear. What is it?
They were better than I remembered as a kid. Chips Ahoy.
Oh.
They're like you take your first bite and you're like, that's a stale cookie, but it's got a crap ton of chocolate chips in it, and all of a sudden you take another bite, and before you know it, you're kind of hooked. So anyway, my wife and I subscribe to the fact that we can't have any of that stuff in the house because I don't like eating it and I can't help myself. But yeah, Oreos, double stuffed Oreos, and frozen Thin Mints are pretty much like crack. Now, as a disclosure, I've never done crack, but it's an analogy that I think is appropriate here and probably offended somebody.
The crack users out there, they're like, there's cookies are nothing like crack. All right. Well, now we know the way
this one publicly.
The way to Steve's heart and stomach is apparently a butt ton of chocolate chips. So we'll keep that in mind. So, and Caleb points out that Chips Ahoy are not real cookies.
No, I agree with that. I agree with it. I also think that Velveeta is not real cheese, but it makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches. So, hey, just, you know what? Just call me American.
As a former Vermonter, that strikes deep into my soul and hurts me.
Should I also tell you that I like Log Cabin and Mrs. Buttersworth?
All right, back on track. So you mentioned your Hasselblad. You know, you got that crazy sensor in there, gorgeous, lovely sensor. Sony is nipping.
That's why I eat Chips Ahoy and Velveeta, because I can't afford real food.
Sony is nipping at the heels. We've got rumors that they have a 100 megapixel sensor capable of 6K video coming soon for a consumer camera. So you know, April Fool's just happened. And one of the things that always happens when I'm on a trip is I forget what day of the week it is, let alone what day of the month it is. So I kept, you know, we're driving along and somebody would read a headline to me and I'd be like, what? And somebody would be like, the A7S III is finally announced. I was like, wait, what? Really? And then I'd be like, somebody else would be like, oh, it's probably April Fool's. And I'd be like, oh yeah, it's April Fool's. So I got nabbed a bunch. But one of the things was A7S3 got announced. That was some goofy headline. No, that's not true, not yet. It's unlikely that this is going to be in the A7S3 because that camera is really focused on lower megapixels, insane high ISO cleanliness. But so we'll see. This may be the A7R4, possibly could jump from 42 megapixels to 100. And, you know, I described Lightroom as a minivan a few minutes ago. It's got the kind of that speed and pickup of a minivan. I shudder to think about working with files that size in Lightroom anytime in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
But they are going to look good. Steve, was there any April Fool's, camera or otherwise, that got you?
I fell for one April Fool's this year. It was our buddy, you know, Ryan Barnes.
Mm-hmm.
He's been on tours with us. He's an outstanding photographer, Nikon shooter, and in fact helped us teach on a glacier tour a couple of years back. Anyway, he's always kind of buying new stuff, right? Like he's really into really right stuff. So every time I see him, I want to see what new stuff, products he has, or new lens and stuff like that. And he kind of does the same thing. Both of us are car buffs. We're both Jeep guys, but he's since gone into buying this Tacoma that he's set up as an Outlander and traveled around the country on dirt roads with it and stuff. And he put this post up that he was going to trade it in for the new Jeep Gladiator that's coming out. And I totally fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. And I said, I kind of put my foot in my mouth because I'm like, dude, I thought we lost you for a while there with that Tacoma. It's good to have you back in the Jeep family. And then I realized it was April Fool's. So anyway, yeah, I love your truck, bro. So I fell for that one. I started to fall for a couple of YouTube videos, but very early on, you could just tell that there was something off about them. MKBHD did one about the Google Pixel 4 Ultra. That was coming out, and it's a pretty good video. And then Peter McKinnon did one on how to make coffee that I was really falling for at the beginning. I was like, dude, that is gross, and realized that he was I think it was an April Fool's one. If not, it was just a funny intro. But that's pretty much it. I was ultra aware this year. Usually I fall for that stuff. I'm a pretty gullible guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Apparently you think Chips Ahoy are actually cookies. That's pretty gullible.
See what I mean?
Yeah. Again, you know, my excuse is being on the trip. I usually am prepped and ready to go. I don't believe anything I see that day. I'm usually generally skeptical about everything I see on the internet, and then especially so that day, but was completely forgot it was April Fool's multiple times that day. There weren't really any camera ones that got me, other than when someone read to me the A7S3 has been announced. I was like, what, really? And that took a couple of minutes before I realized, oh, it's April Fool's. Maritza posted that this woolly sunfish had been board, and I was like, I looked at that for a minute, and I was like, whoa, that fish is so cool. And then I was like, oh,
yeah, I love the fact that companies and some of the more unsuspecting organizations and stuff are getting behind April Fools with social media and everything. I think it's absolutely hilarious. So I think it's great. It just ticks me off, though, when you see these companies come out with something, and there's always a story of somebody who's offended. And in today's world, it just makes news right away. I mean, oh, come on, it's April Fool's, folks.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. We got lots of other stuff to cover, and just Roy has put together a fantastic list of news bits and extra articles that you want to check out if you're interested in photography at all. You can find all of this at photorec.tv/MMH. That stands for Mish Mash Highlights. Steve and I cherry pick our favorites and chat about them a little bit, but you want to go check out this list to kind of find everything that we're talking about. We mentioned the SL2. It's rumored that the SL3 will be announced very soon, so that's looking good. You know, it is a DSLR, but it is a very small, compact DSLR that does a lot of the same that the larger DSLRs from Canon does. I say larger, but I'm talking about like the T7i and 80D. So in a lot of ways, it has a lot of similarities, but it stays nice and compact and small. So that's good. And I think that's it. There's a wrap. There's a kind of a list of all of the best photography April Fool's Day jokes there if you want. And apparently Jimmy Fallon, I didn't click on this link yet. We're running out of time, so I'm just going to mention it. He shot an entire episode with the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. Oh, gosh, how much did they make from Samsung to do that? That's what I'd like to know. That's what I know. And let's do a quick interlude and share with you this Petapixel article of these multiple exposure iPhotos were made entirely in camera. Check these out. This is what I love about photography, the diversity of it. From being able to, take just one awesome landscape photo of sunset in the Grand Canyon like Tara's to doing some multiple exposure pictures like this. This is really cool. So he's got a couple of different options here, or a couple different ways. The eye was shot with a Canon 100mm macro, and in the studio with lights, 5D Mark III. And this is done in camera. The 5D Mark III can do multiple exposures into one file. And then the forest photos were shot using a Canon 24-70 f2.8. and a Canon 70-200, depending on what they were. So just so cool. Actually, I'm not sure what the second image is here. Is it just a really wild painting?
Huh. Yeah, I'm not sure. That is cool looking though. I can't believe that's all done in camera.
I know. That's what I really like about it. So, some might not call this photography. I certainly think it's way more photography than some composite photography is. But it's neat art any way you look at it. Very cool. Very cool. Oh, and then back to little news stories. I want to cover, let's see, we'll go right to the Mish Mash highlights. You can see, I'm interested in covering this article here before we talk about crop versus full frame. That's choosing the right neutral density filter for the situation. So, I think it's tricky sometimes to kind of figure out which one is going to be the right one for you. So let's see if we could scan this real quick. If you want an image of a sea surface that's smoothed out, it's quite simple. Use a 10 stop or even extreme 15 stop to reach shutter times that are between 2, 5, 10, or 15 minutes. Now, Steve, that's a little bit different than what you were saying.
Yes. 15 minutes. I would. Well, go ahead.
Well, I'll just say this. I don't think you need that long for water, but you often do need those extremes for the clouds.
Yeah.
And so let's see on the right. Let's see, what does he have here? The left is shot with a big stopper, 120 seconds, and on the right with a just a 0.9, half a second. So this is just kind of, I think, a neat comparison of what you get. How do you feel about that one on the left there, Steve?
Actually, I like that a lot. That's and I like that they did them side by side, because actually I like both of those. I'd like to see like a 1 second exposure, because you can still see all the detail in the upper right corner of the half second exposure, the ripples and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I like that you've got rocks in the water. You've got that cloudiness appears around stuff. But when you just have water and nothing in there that it's kind of formed around, and you get that cloudiness, you just have to kind of be careful with that.
Yep. And I think we talk about this often. I just talked about this in Zion National Park. We had some flowing water. You don't feel like you have to do this to the water every time you see flowing water. There can be really interesting detail, and the author makes that point right here. Here's 1/3 of a second, no ND filter, and you get some really neat textures that work well. And if this was all completely featureless and smooth, I think it would be a less interesting image. And in the forest, in shadowy areas, no ND filter was needed at all. And some of you might be shopping, you're looking at the cost of a quality ND filter, and we strongly recommend a quality one. You get a cheap one and you get some serious color casts that are just really hard to correct, unless you're happy making all of your images black and white. So spend the money on a quality one. If you don't have the money for a quality yet, just go out in the evening or go out early in the morning before the light gets up, and you can get those longer shutter speeds with maybe just a circular polarizer or nothing at all. So I think this is a good, it's got some great examples of the different speeds and the way the water looks. Here's kind of the shot where it's super milky, and that can be interesting, but it can also be interesting to have some texture in there as well. So again, that's in our Mish Mash highlights. You can go take a look at that. Okay. Let's move on. We got to wrap this show up here in a few minutes, but I do want to talk a little bit about crop versus full frame, because I've been shooting now with the EOS R and the Fuji X-T3 on this Southwest trip. Fuji X-T3 is a crop sensor, kind of a full featured crop sensor. The EOS RP, sorry, I think I said R. The EOS RP is, I'd say, more of a bare bones budget minded full frame camera. Did I say full frame twice? Show's been going too long. I'm starting to repeat myself. And I was curious to see where we are today in this kind of place. I did a crop versus full frame video, gosh, I think back in 2014. That's about 5 years ago now.
Oh yeah, there's been a lot of things come to market since then.
A lot of things come to market. So let me pull up a couple of pictures that I've got in Lightroom that I want to share with you all and see what you think about these images. Let's start with this one here. Sorry, I know you can't see yet. Give me a second. Okay. Got a side-by-side there. You see that?
Yep.
One is shot with a full frame. One is shot with a crop sensor. If you know kind of what to look for as clues, it's pretty easy to tell which is which. But I was really impressed. This is at ISO 4000, which is where you
guess the full frame's on the right.
You are correct. Yep. And why did you guess that?
You can see the noise reduction compared to the image on the left.
Oh, you mean noise reduction or depth?
Not noise reduction, but you can see less noise in the one on the right than you can on the left. Look at the wood grain right in the foreground.
Yeah. There is, yes, definitely a bit more noise, but I was surprised by just how it's not that different. And I think actually, yeah, there is a good bit of noise there when we zoom in. It is more. But ISO 4000 with a crop sensor hanging right in there. And actually what makes the crop seem a little bit noisier is that bigger depth of field that you get at f4. So when you compare these two.
But even if you do, I mean, if the question comes up like, do I need a full frame camera? To me, the answer is no, you don't. You just need to know how to use your crop sensor. You need to know how to do the math. You need to know if that crop sensor is a 1.5 crop, 1.6 crop, or a 2x crop, and then apply that according to your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And if you can do that, you can do the math, and it's pretty easy. You can figure out how to use your crop sensor camera and produce the same images that you can get out of your full frame. The problem comes when you're shooting in low light or you're shooting at certain ISO levels, because you've got bigger pixels with a full frame, just more surface area. And so you're just going to get less noise the larger the sensor, because you're capturing more light.
Yep. And and this may in some ways not be a fair comparison, because the Fuji X-T3 sensor is quite modern and the Canon full frame sensor is a little dated now. But you can still see that it does do better in low light. Is it dramatically different? No, not so much. Not as much as I would think, but I do wonder if we put it against a very modern full frame sensor versus a modern crop sensor, we would probably see more of a difference. On this one, thoughts, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, you just notice, now we're just talking about kind of fall off, depth of field here and whatnot. Obviously, you got a bit more sharpness on the left side. Is that the Fuji on the left?
That is the Fuji on the left.
Frame on the right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that Fuji does not have an anti-aliasing filter. which should mean the images, the detail should be a little bit sharper, whereas the EOS RP does still have an anti-aliasing filter. The benefit of that filter is you have less moire, which means in the fine detail, you shouldn't get any kind of pattern. But you go back to this and we don't see that on the Fuji. So it seems to deal just fine with that, even without. Most manufacturers now have figured out how to deal with moire, even without that. And then let's pop over here. These were two images where I exposed for kind of the foreground, and the sky was pretty blown out in both cases. I simply brought the exposure and the highlights down. And any guesses which is which here?
I'm guessing the full frame's now on the left side.
That's correct. Yeah. And I was pretty disappointed in what happened to the sky as I brought those highlights and exposures down. Instead of turning blue, it just kind of flattened out and went gray. Whereas on the right-hand side, it really stayed blue. This says to me, this is a kind of a quick and dirty test. None of these are super scientific tests, but these two pictures were shot at basically the same instant. The dynamic range on the Fuji seems to be excellent, which in my mind these days is more important in a lot of ways than kind of the higher ISO noise.
Yeah.
And I think that's all I wanted to share with those. There's so many other points of discussion. I know somebody asked at the very beginning, do they need a full frame? They're a photojournalist. You made a couple of good points just a minute ago. I really like the fact that the lenses stay fairly small and compact. I think that is a strength of crop sensors, and for travel, they're a great kind of middle ground. I mean, and then in that $500, I thought that this Micro Four Thirds sensor was going to get blown away by the Nikon D3500, but when I put them side by side, they stayed very similar. And the lenses on the little Micro Four Thirds guys are tiny and stay tiny. So if that's important to you, don't feel like you need to upgrade to full frame. I feel like there's always kind of this full frame is where it's at, and not for everybody. And for some people, it's not the best choice.
Yeah, it does require you to know your equipment and how to do the math, though. I'll tell people, like, no, you don't need a full frame unless you're a professional shooter dealing with a lot of low light scenarios, or you're blowing stuff up to just be absolutely massive, where you need to capture as much light as you can possibly get on as large a sensor as possible. You don't need a full frame, but what you do need to do is educate yourself on how to do the math, right? So if you got a Micro Four Thirds sensor, and it's a really good one, it's a newer one, and you need to shoot a shot at 50 millimeters, well, you need a 25 millimeter lens, right? 25 millimeters with a 2x crop factor gets you 50 millimeters, where somebody with a 50 millimeter lens on a full frame is able to get that same shot. And you got to apply that to the aperture as well. And that's where things get a little sticky, because let's say, you're at f4 and on a Micro Four Thirds, in order to get that depth of field fall off, you multiply by 2. And that gets you what are you shooting now at a f2? Mm-hmm. And you may not have the lens selection down at f2. So, and then with the ISO, I forget what the formula is, but I think it's like you divide it by the crop factor squared. So if you're shooting at 400 ISO on a full frame camera and you've got a Micro Four Thirds, well, you've got to divide 2 into 400 and then square it. So it does bump the ISO up quite a bit. So as long as you know how to do the math, and actually the Northrops did a great video on this a while back. It's worth checking out. But as long as you can do the math, like, you can do virtually anything you want to do with a crop sensor camera that you can with a full frame, until you get into those really low light scenarios, or you need a super, super fast lens. And because everything is based off of that 35 millimeter full frame setting.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you in some points and say, I don't worry a whole lot about that math. You know, I shoot with what works for me for the situation. And if I wanted to travel super light, I would be very happy with a crop like the Fuji X-T3. And I wouldn't necessarily worry about trying to match what the full frame is. But if there are situations where you need to do that, yeah, it's worthwhile to know that math. But otherwise, know that you're not suffering greatly these days with a crop sensor. You don't have to be in full frame. Your back is going to thank you if you're traveling a lot. I just keep coming back to that because that's kind of my world and that's our world. We travel a lot. You have medium format, but that Hasselblad system is amazingly light and portable for that size of that sensor in there.
Yeah, I would not have jumped over to medium format if it was, you know, your traditional digital medium format. Well, number one, I can't afford that. And number two, those are big cameras. So when I got down to comparing the Fuji GFX and the Hasselblad X1D, it was the Hasselblad won out. Even though on paper it wasn't the better choice, it was much better for travel and stuff for what I do. So yeah, I totally agree. Look, when you're looking through the viewfinder and you're composing your shot, whether it's full frame or crop or whatever, you're seeing what you're going to see, or you got image, what's it called, live view or whatever that you're working with. Like, that's where the art kind of comes in. So, but if you want to learn how to use your camera in the same way that somebody with a full frame camera is using, maybe they don't even know what they're doing, then learning the math and how it applies helps you understand that you really don't need a full frame. You just don't.
No, yep, not these days. I asked this on Instagram a little while ago. I'd love to know chat room, or if you're watching this after the fact, leave a comment. Out of the Canon EOS RP with a 24-105 kit lens, or the Fuji X-T3 with its 18-55 kit lens, which would you take? They work out to be similar in price. Fuji is definitely a little bit cheaper. Body only, the EOS RP is cheaper, but when you put both of these things together, the Fuji comes out a little bit cheaper. I'm going to try my best to get a full review of both of these cameras out in the next couple of weeks before we head off on a trip. And I'll just say that after shooting 1,000 or so pictures with both of these cameras over the course of the Southwest this week, the Fuji has a lot to love in it. And the Canon is a good, reliable, Canon friendly to use menu system, but it doesn't excite me. And it doesn't, I never went, ooh, that's nice. Whereas the Fuji, there are some features and functions in it that I'm like, ooh, that's nice. For one thing,
that's the one piece that I left out on my whole, going with the Hasselblad medium format is just, and that's what I love about what Fuji's doing is aesthetically, they are building beautiful products and they're built extremely well. Yeah. And I mean, it's just, they're just awesome. I'm kind of a fanboy and I don't own a single one of their products, but yeah, they're just doing such an awesome job right now.
I want to mention this real quick. I searched. I said, is anybody else talking about kind of comparing these two? And I just did a quick search, Fuji X-T3 versus EOS RP. And the very first thing that came up is a Fuji Addict page from back in February, the Apatolit. I don't know. That's one of those websites. There are so many out there that do like 2 camera comparisons and give you a little rundown. It's the crappiest thing ever. Let me show it to you. Just so crappy. So here it is. Let me just kind of enlarge this. They got the EOS RP, the Fuji X-T3, and they run down advantages of the EOS RP, better moire control because it's got the, well, I haven't seen that. More dynamic range, capable of capturing a wider spectrum of light and darker details. No, I'm not seeing that in the real world. I showed you that one test I did, and then I shot other side-by-sides in the Southwest. More selfie friendly, yes. Sharper images, has handshaking reducing image stabilization built in. No, it does not. That's wrong. It's got it in the lens, but the same with the Fuji. So why are you calling that out? And then what was it? There was something else. Oh, the Fuji more heavily discounted, has been on the market for longer. No, that's not true. I mean, yes, it's been on the market for longer.
Well, didn't it come out about the same time as the RP?
The XT3 came out a little bit earlier. I thought I saw one other thing that really, I think the size of this. Anyway, my point being, you just can't trust this stuff. They just get so many things wrong. Now this site, I think, rushed, not Fuji Addict, but I have no idea how to say that. I've never heard of this site. I think they rushed to be one of the first to have this comparison because when other people search, they want to get up there in the Google juice. But they just made a bunch of mistakes. So don't trust those side-by-side comparisons. Join Penn, come ask us. We'll give you our honest opinion, and then you'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah, and if we don't know, we'll look it up and get it to you as right away.
Exactly. Right.
And John Drummond makes a point on here. He says the RPI is digital stabilization, but it's not in body.
That's right. That's right. It's got electronic stabilization for video only.
Yep.
So it's still there. It's still kind of a false information.
Well, now Canon did come out. I think it was yesterday, or maybe it was today. It was not April 1st. I was very cognizant of that, and did say that a professional mirrorless R camera is going to come out.
Yeah.
But they also said that they're still fully committed to their DSLR line. So, but they said the mirrorless camera that the professionals want is coming.
Yeah.
That's kind of all I saw on it. I don't know if you have any more information.
I don't have more information than that either. You know, based on rumors and based on my own hunch, we're not going to see that this year. We might get more. We might get specs and kind of that preview announcement this year, but I don't think we're going to actually see a product until sometime next year.
Yeah, my guess is they will not do any updates DSLR-wise to the 5DS line, the S and the SR. They will kind of just shelve that to where it was. And I'll tell you something, man, that camera actually got some longevity out of it. I still think it's an amazing camera for stills.
It is, yeah.
And they'll launch, you know, a really super high-end mirrorless system, which is exciting. But yeah, I wouldn't look for it coming around the corner in the next month or two.
Yeah. Marasa points out that I didn't test the Sony full frame. No, I was curious to see how this kind of budget full frame versus Fuji top of the line at crop kind of compared with each other. So I'm curious. I also have the Sony a6400 here, and you know that in some ways could be compared as well. I think they both have some strength. So I'll be talking more about all of that stuff, trying to shove it all in the next 3 weeks before we head off somewhere. Real quick, let's hit 2 questions. One, Heather W. wants to know, are there any shorter workshops on the horizon? Yes, we often regularly throw in a Yosemite Valley workshop, which is just a long weekend. I'm offering 2 trips. Those are sold out, Rainier and Zion, which are just long weekends. But there will be more of those in 2020 as well. So best thing to do is to sign up for the email list at mckaylive.com. That's the place where you most regularly get those posts. If you are, I think, Heather, you're a Photo Enthusiast Network member. You know, we post there as well. You get first dibs on many of these trips, which is a big thing since they sell out in an hour or 2. So just stay tuned. There will be shorter trips.
Yeah. Yeah. And basically what happens, like when David is kind of planning his calendar, is the larger international tours have to kind of fall where they are because there's a lot more planning, a lot more tour companies that you have to partner with and talk to and get everything in line. And then once those are set, then you kind of intersperse the smaller trips where they can fit in with those. So it's kind of, you know, he puts those big pieces in place and then puts the smaller trips around those. So they will be coming. They usually end up being announced, you know, later than some of these bigger international trips are announced, sometimes 2 years ahead of time, just to give people time to plan and save and stuff like that. But there definitely will be more coming.
Yeah.
Good question.
John wants to know the best 150 to 600 lens for birding, Sigma Contemporary or the Tamron G2? I like the Tamron G2. They made some nice improvements to that. I found it to be just a teeny tiny bit sharper than the Sigma. And its focusing is just as good and fast and consistent. So I'd go with the Tamron 150 to 600.
Sigma Sport, I'm guessing, is out.
That's Sigma Sport. That is actually, John even mentioned Sigma Sport's too heavy and expensive. I agree.
Yeah,
It is a very fine lens, but it is way too much weight, and
that
it is
sucker is a beast, man.
dollars too. It's dollars. So yeah. Hey, folks, if you made it to the end of the show, give a quick thumbs up. Thanks, Steve, for his time in here. I don't pay him for this. But now I know if I just send him a box of Chip Ahoy cookies, will probably be good.
I'm pretty easy, man.
And I just put Steve's Instagram in chat. You should go follow him too. He fairly regularly on Instagram posts work. And they should go follow you on Facebook, your photo page.
Find me on Facebook, Steve Scourge Photography. Just if you could like my page, I typically post there much more so than Instagram. And I'd love to see your comments and love to see you out there. And if you're not a Pen member, hopefully you do get a chance to look into that. We are a pretty nice bunch of people, if I do say so myself. It's just a friendly place. And that's, yeah.
Yeah. And there's a free 10-day trial. And Steve and I, you just saw us chit chat. We're not trying to get you. If you try it out for 8 days and you want to cancel, you just let us know and we cancel. Make sure you don't get charged. There's no hidden. We're not like trying to steal your cookies.
Well, the thing with Photo Enthusiast Network is we're 4 partners. For those who don't know, there's 4 of us that came together and created this company. We all have our own individual businesses that we run. I have Steve Scourge Photography. Toby has Photo Rec TV. David and Allie McKay have their tours. And so Photo Enthusiast Network is just a way that we get to continue teaching people off tour and just be involved in your growth as a photographer. But it doesn't mean that we're not totally dedicated and involved to this company, but it's just, I like it that way because as partners, we can sit back and say, if it's not the right fit for you, that's okay. That's why you have the 10-day trial. Check it out, see what you think. And for those that have gotten involved, though, I will say that they've tended to re-up their membership, and we're eternally grateful for that because we're starting to see a lot of members helping each other out and doing so in a non-intimidating way. And everybody's just, I know I say that a lot, but I'm just so proud of the group and to see where people have gone with their photography. If we say it all the time, if you just read the weekly Tuesday tips and put that into practice, you will become a much better photographer over the course of a year. Every week, we just send out a simple tip, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, pun intended, for what we offer.
Nice. Well said, Steve. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, chat room. Again, thank you. We love having you here. We love to see new names in there. Even if you don't join Pen, join us again next week. Same time, same place, with more or less cookies. I don't know. You have to turn in and find out.
Damn cookie monster.
Bye-bye, everybody. We'll see you soon.